had the fascist totalitarianism of the beginning of the 20th century. We have had the communist totalitarianism, and I really believe that we are witnessing now the emergence of a new, fully fledged totalitarian state, which is a global totalitarian state. It's a velvet glove totalitarianism up until now. You don't really feel it. The ultimate totalitarianism, Huxley said, is a totalitarian state in which people even don't know that they are not free. They are convinced that they are free, but while they are convinced that they are free, they do exactly what the state wants. That's the ultimate totalitarian state, in which the indoctrination and propaganda is so successful that you even don't need terror to make people do what the state wants. And after a while, the totalitarian state always becomes aggressive and uses terror. But not in the initial stages. So I think we are dealing with a new technocratic totalitarianism. Now, totalitarianism in which the transhumanist ideology is the underlying motivator. And indeed, we have to ask ourselves, when being confronted with this, what can we do about it? Well, as soon as in the 19th century, certain scholars started to understand the phenomenon of mass formation, the most important, I think, in the 19th century was Gustave Le Bon. In his book, The Psychology of the Crowds, he noticed, and he mentions that every time a mass formation emerges, there is a certain group of people who do not fall prey to it. So there are people, for one reason or another, who do not fall prey to the mass formation. Nobody knows exactly why, but there's always a group who doesn't fall prey to it. And the people who really fall prey to it, their percentage is rather low. It's usually not much more than 20 to 30%. So, but there is then 70–75% of the people who just feel that there is something wrong with the narrative, but who will never have the courage to step up and speak out against the narrative. But so every time a large mass formation emerges, there is a group of people who doesn't fall prey to it, and who tries to wake up the other people and try to show them how absurd the narrative is where they believe in. For certain reasons, the narratives that lead to mass formation always become absurd after a while. There is no other option, because the field of attention is so narrow that the narrative cannot else than become absurd. And this small group of people, Gustave Le Bon said, this small group of people will usually try to wake the other people up, show them how absurd the narrative is where they believe in, but Gustave Le Bon said, this small group of people usually will not succeed in waking them up. Mass formation is an extremely powerful kind of hypnosis, and usually the people that are in the grip of the mass formation, or the people who are not in the grip of the mass formation, won't be capable of waking up those who are in. But, and that's something extremely important, crucial, Gustave Le Bon says, the fact that the people who do not fall prey to the mass formation do not succeed in the waking up the masses does not mean that their speech has no effect. That speech makes that the mass formation does not go to the ultimate stage. That speech makes that the mass hypnosis does not become so deep that the masses start to become convinced that they have to eliminate each and every one of the people who do not go along with them. That's typically the end stage of a mass formation. When people are in the last stage of the mass formation, they are so obsessed, so in the grip of the narrative, that they really believe that everyone who doesn't go along with the narrative is like mad, inhumane, shows no solidarity, and deserves no better than being destroyed. And that's Gustave Le Bon remarks, that if there are people who continue to speak out, and who continue to say there is something wrong with that narrative, usually the masses do not go to the ultimate stage. Stopping to speak out when there is a major mass formation is fatal. And history has shown it very clearly. Like in 1930, in the Soviet Union, the resistance decided to go underground and to stop to speak out in public space. Within 6 months, the destruction campaign started. In 1935, exactly the same happened in Nazi Germany. The resistance went underground. Within 6 months, I don't know, might have been a year in Nazi Germany, the destruction campaign started. history shows it very clearly. It can be very clever to stop to speak out when you are confronted with a classical dictatorship. But if you are confronted with a totalitarian state, and you stop to speak out, you're dead. And we have to do it quickly enough. Once the totalitarian process goes over a certain limit, it's over. But if you continue to speak out, there is a good chance that the totalitarian system, the totalitarian state, will destroy itself before it destroys you. That's one major tactical principle. Totalitarianism. Totalitarianism is always intrinsically self-destructive. Almost everyone who has been studying totalitarianism has been marked that there is something intrinsically self-destructive in a totalitarian system. But the point is that you have to make sure that the system destroys itself before it destroys you, of course. And that's why we have to stick to the first and most important ethical principles. I think I will not go too deep into that, but I think the most important thing to understand is that totalitarianism is equal to a complete loss of ethical awareness in a population. And the only remedy against totalitarianism is to stick to ethical principles. The people who do not go along with it shouldn't think too rationally about what they should do. In the first place, they should realize that they have to stay loyal to ethical principles. Yeah? That's the most important thing. And the first of these ethical principles is to live up to the ethical duty to speak in a sincere way. As a first ethical principle, we should always try to live up to. Totalitarianism tries to kill the soul of the people. It tries to replace the soul by one totalitarian identity. And if you continue to speak out sincere speech, I will go into that in a moment. Sincere speech is exactly this kind of speech which comes from the soul, from what you feel within, and which makes your soul stronger. So no matter from where you look at the phenomenon, you can clearly see living up to ethical principles, sincerity, is the first and most important strategical and tactical principle to follow when you're confronted with totalitarianism. Yeah. No. I don't need water. Yes. Yes, so that's important. You have to continue to speak out, and now the question, of course, is, it doesn't matter how you speak out. Not every kind of speech is as effective. Not at all. There are certain kinds of speech who even speed up the process of, how long am I talking now? Because I always lose my awareness of time. What?
90 minutes.
Give me 15 more minutes, and I will finish. How should we speak out? That's what my next book is about. The Psychology of Truth. That won't be the title, but it's about psychology of truth. You can clearly see, I said, no matter from what perspective you look at it, the real crisis we find ourselves in, and the disease of totalitarianism, essentially consists of the fact that as a society and as a culture, we lost touch with truth. That's very strange. The pursuit of rationality made people lose touch with what truth is. And we live in a society which is sick of this new kind of lie, which we call propaganda. And the only remedy is not counter-propaganda. People sometimes ask me that, like, should we not use counter-propaganda to break the power of propaganda? I really don't believe so. Exactly the opposite holds true. I think that our answer must be sincerity. And I think that that is our major challenge and task now, is to rediscover and to reappreciate the crucial importance of the phenomenon of truth for a human being. The better you understand, but you shouldn't be naive. It's very difficult to determine what truth exactly is. If we think naively about truth, we lost it already. If we think we can possess the truth, for instance, we lost it already. Truth is something we can resonate with for a moment, but we can never possess it. And, you know, maybe I will tell a little bit about how a child that is born experiences language. Like, when a child is born, it immediately, even from before it is born, resonates with the voice of the mother. Immediately after birth, it can recognize the voice of the mother already from all other voices. And there are beautiful experiments, good experiments. There are certain psychological experiments which have value. There are good experiments which show that beyond a shade of doubt. And more than that, a child can not only recognize the voice of the mother, it can imitate it immediately. The crying of a child immediately after birth shows already the same musical characteristics of the voice of the mother. And so a child, even in the womb, before it is born, resonates with the mother's voice. And after birth, this resonance continues. A child will imitate the form language, the facial expressions, and the sounds the mother makes. And while it is doing so, it constantly, psychologically connects with the mother. It feels the mother in the most direct way. It feels its environment in the most direct way. It resonates, a young child resonates perfectly with the world around it, perfectly. It feels what the other feels. You cannot deceive a young child. It resonates from core to core. It feels what you feel. When it reaches the age of 6 months old, a young child knows the truth of the family system it is born in perfectly, even much better than the adults around it, because it resonates. This resonance leads also to an impressive learning capacity in the child. A young child can learn to distinguish all phonemes, all elementary sounds of all the languages in the world in 2 weeks' time. For a grown-up, it's almost impossible to distinguish all the phonemes of all the languages in the world. He cannot learn to distinguish these phonemes in his entire lifetime. A child has such a subtle capacity to resonate with sound outside of itself that it has a tremendous learning potential. And it is this, this resonance leads to an enormous resonating capacity, empathic capacity. A child feels, has an enormous capacity to feel empathy for someone else. If a child looks at another child that drops to the ground and that hurts itself, it will often start to cry itself. So a child, on the basis of its capacity to resonate, has a huge capacity to feel empathy for someone else. This state in which a child resonates with not only the social world around it, but also with the material world, is a state that, as an adult, we can almost not imagine anymore, except in certain very exceptional circumstances. If we use mescaline, for instance, like the natural variant of LSD, we get in this state again. People who use mescaline will report exactly this. They start to resonate, they start to feel the world around them, they become the other persons around them, they even become the material objects around them, and they feel them from within, just like a little child. And also the mystical experiences were exactly this. People reported that they like the mystics, the great mystics, reported that they had the capacity to become the other persons with whom they were talking, for instance. Aldous Huxley, to refer to him again, has written a wonderful book about that. The Doors of Perception is the title of the book, and the famous 60s group The Doors is named after the title of that book, The Doors of Perception. And in The Doors of Perception, Aldous Huxley describes exactly this, the experiences when you use masculine, and he remarks that they are exactly the same experiences as the mystics reported. And both the masculine experience and the experience, the mystical experience, show this major characteristics. The first thing that happens when you use masculine, what happens during a mystical experience is exactly that your ego disappears. And that's what a young child also has. A young child, younger than 6 months, has no ego. It has no ego yet. The ego structure emerges when a child is in between 6 and 9 months old. What happens then? At that moment, somewhere in between 6 and 9 months, a child starts to recognize itself in a mirror. A child recognizes itself for the first time in the mirror, usually in a very specific situation, when it sits on the arm of the mother, and the mother points to the mirror and says, "Look, that is you." For certain reasons, which I won't describe now, can a child then, for the first time, start to realize that the image in the mirror is its own image. And at that moment, something very specific happens. A child starts to laugh in a very enthusiastic way when it recognizes itself for the first time in the mirror. And the reason is because the mother usually points with happiness, enthusiasm in the mirror. She says, "Look, that's you." That makes that what the child sees in the mirror is not merely its own image, its self-image, it's also the ideal image of the other. So what the child experiences when it recognizes itself for the first time in the mirror is the disappearance of the gap between the self-image and the ideal image of the other. In other words, what the child experiences when it recognizes itself for the first time in the mirror is the first narcissistic satisfaction. Yes? The first time it says, "That's me, and I am the ideal object of the other." A child starts to laugh at the moment because it feels so much enjoyment, and it usually, for the rest of his life, tries to reproduce that initial narcissistic experience. Every time we look in the mirror, we hope a little bit that what we will see there will be the ideal image of the other. Okay? And from then on, something very specific happens. The child, in the first months of its life, resonated from core to core. The strings of its body vibrated together with the strings of the bodies of the other people around it. All the attention of the child was focused on the inner resonating processes in the body, and from then on that changes. All the psychological attention is sucked away from the core of the body and is invested in the surface of the body. The child from then on is obsessed by the question to what extent it looks like the ideal image. And that's the moment where all the attention of the child starts to be absorbed by the outer ideal image and by the matrix of social rules which describe what it should do to embody that ideal image. So from then on, a child starts to be obsessed by the question, who do I have to be loved by the other? That's the moment where the ego structure is born, and that's the moment where a child loses its sincerity a little bit. And at every moment, we feel that in our lives. I tell it because it tells us something about what truth speech is. Every moment we open our mouth and start to speak, we make that fundamental choice. We can speak in such a way that it seems as if we embody the ideal image. In that case, we constantly are thinking what we need to say in order to be approved by the other. And when we speak sincerely, we do the opposite. We do not care too much about what the other wants us to say. We just connect to our own vibrating, resonating body, which is like an antenna, which resonates with everything around us. We connect with what we feel inside, and we just choose to articulate it, no matter what the consequences are. in the world of appearances. And every time we do that, our soul becomes stronger and our ego becomes weaker. Literally, sincere speech makes the ego stronger. It makes that the energy makes the soul stronger and makes the ego weaker. It makes that the energy which is invested in the outer ideal image in the matrix of social rules goes back to our inner resonating core again. It's this kind of speech which literally penetrates through the ego, which literally penetrates through what I often call the veil of appearances. It's this kind of speech which is true speech, which is sincere speech, and which has the capacity to connect people from soul to soul, and that's what we feel. True speech is always vulnerable speech. The ancient Greeks knew that already. Every time you speak the truth, you are vulnerable. People will be angry with you, for instance, and you also will feel vulnerable because you show exactly this, what makes you not match the ideal image. That's, if you want to speak sincerely, you have to try to feel where your weakest, most vulnerable point is and speak from that point. That's true speech is always vulnerable speech. If you speak in this way, you penetrate through the veil of appearances, and you have a chance that the person who will listen to you opens up his own ideal image, opens up his own ego, and allows your sincere words to enter his own embodied soul. And in that case, if he does so, if you have someone who has the courage to speak sincerely, and someone who has the integrity to listen in a sincere way, the two embodied souls literally starts to tremble and vibrate on the same frequency, on the sincere frequency, and you get connection, you feel that. If you're in a group of people, and someone says something that makes him really vulnerable, something of which you know, someone says something that is usually hidden behind the wall of outer appearances, as someone speaks in such a sincere way, you will feel a vibrating silence and you will feel connection. You will feel a real group. Sincere speech is the true solution to the problem of loneliness and disconnectedness. It reconnects. It takes away the root cause of the mass formation and totalitarianism, and it inhibits immediately also the mass formation itself. So that's, I'm sure, the better you understand the psychology of truth, the better you understand that what we are going through at this moment is really a metaphysical revolution. It's a process in which a society which is led or which believes in the illusion of rational understanding is being replaced by a society which centers on sincerity and truth. And what happens at the psychological level is exactly this. We are seeing now a field of tension between, on the one hand, a mass in the grip of propaganda, of sophisticated lies, and on the other hand, we see the emergence of a real group of people connected from individual to individual through sincerity, which resonate on the same frequency. I can feel it almost physically. I go so much I travel around the world, and everywhere I feel that people go through the same process. Everywhere I see, 2 years ago, people were all focusing on Klaus Schwab and on the World Economic Forum and so on and so on. And yes, of course, we have to invest a little bit of energy and understanding Klaus Schwab, but not too much. I see that more and more people now start to become aware of the importance of sincerity and truth speech. Like the alternative movement, no matter how you call it, the resistance movement, doesn't matter. It's very divided internally. You see a lot of conflict, and that's because they function to the same old principle. We fall prey to the illusion that what connects us should be the same opinion. That is not true. A group that is connected and unified by opinion is a mass, of course. In a mass, everyone has to think the same. In a real group, in which people are really connected to each other as individuals, your opinion is only of secondary importance. It's even the case that the more the other think differently, the more you will love him, because the more he can really learn you something as a human being. If someone is identical, Someone who is identical cannot learn you something new. And if you love someone only because he thinks just like you and because he looks just like you, what you love is not the other, it's your own mirror image. And what you feel is not love, it's narcissism. So, and as soon as this group of people, no matter who feels that there is something wrong with this dominant kind of society, as soon as this group of people really is unified by sincerity, as soon as this group becomes energetically more powerful than the propagandized masses, the era of totalitarianism is over. That's the point. When you realize that, you realize that we can all contribute every time we speak a sincere word, be it on a television program, be it on the radio, be it on the market, be it on the street, or at the kitchen table, it doesn't matter. Every time we speak a sincere word, every time we have the courage to show something that is usually hidden behind the world of appearances, we create true connection from soul to soul. And every time, at that moment, we overcome totalitarianism. That's something very important to understand. We all have power. Society as a psychological system is a complex dynamical system. And one characteristic of complex dynamical systems is that a minor change in one detail of the system changes the entire system. And that holds true for society and for speech as well. Every time we speak a sincere word, no matter how small, you have to take that literally. In a pot of boiling water, a change in the vibration state of one molecule of the water changes the entire convection pattern in the water. In exactly the same way, every time we can become a little bit more sincere, we change the entire society. So we all can contribute to a solution, and we do contribute if we try to become more sincere and more aware of sincereness. Mahatma Gandhi is one of the people who has shown us in a magnificent way what the power of sincerity is. You have to read, if you want, the autobiography of Mahatma Gandhi, which is called, I bought it like, I don't know, 2 years ago or something, because I started to understand that non-violent resistance is the only internal resistance that is effective in, when confronted with emerging totalitarianism. And as soon as I opened the book, I was happily surprised to see that the title of the book was Experiments on Truth, and that Gandhi said from the first pages onwards, the essence of all non-violent resistance is sincerity and sincere speech. And his entire life, Gandhi tried to make progress, to become more sincere. He practiced it in a simple way, an almost naive, childish way. He practiced the art of sincere speech. I give workshops about that now. Hundreds of people have followed that in Belgium and Holland. Like the art of speech, the art of sincere speech. And I love it myself because I feel how much it changes your life. Gandhi has shown us what the power is. Gandhi said in the first chapters of his book, I don't know exactly where, he said, I had no major talent at all. I was not handsome, I was not physically strong, I was not intelligent at school, I was not a good writer, and I was not a good speaker. But this man, without any major talent, inherited a power that even the most powerful army in the world didn't have at the moment. He kicked out the English of India. That's what we have to realize. In the end, simple sincerity, the oldest act humanity has ever done, speaking in a sincere way, will prove more powerful than even the most impressive propaganda machinery in the world. Voilà, I will stop there.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Matthias, for this absolutely wonderful and impactful speech. I'm sure that, true to your words, it has resonated with everybody here. Hvala občinstvu, zaradi tega, ker se nam je vse skupaj malo zavleklo, bomo vprašanja malo drugače zastavili in sicer namesto, da jih boste dali v košaro, oziroma teh par, ki jih bomo prebrali, ampak če ima kdo še kakšno vprašanje, bomo pa po občinstvu poslali mikrofon in boste lahko vprašali direktno. Vidim, da nekdo že drži gor roko.